Why do so many people believe Africa is breaking apart right now? Not slowly, not over millions of years, but suddenly, violently, as if a continent woke up one morning and decided to tear itself in two. If you've seen the headlines, the animations, the red arrows and glowing cracks, you'd be forgiven for thinking East Africa is about to drift into the ocean within our lifetime. But that story isn't just exaggerated, it's misleading. And it tells us more about how modern media treats Africa than about what's actually happening beneath the Earth's surface. So let's strip the myth away and start with the truth. Africa is not splitting because of a sudden disaster. It's moving because it has always been moving. The Earth's crust isn't a single shell. It's a mosaic of massive plates floating on a semi-molten mantle, shifting by centimeters each year. Africa sits on one of the oldest and most stable of those plates, but even stability has its limits. Deep beneath East Africa lies a geological process so slow, so patient, that humans almost never notice it while it's happening. Almost. That's the East African Rift System. And no, it's not a crack you could fall into. It is not a fault line opening like a zipper. It is a zone, a broad region where the African plate is stretching, thinning, and gradually dividing into two smaller plates, one to the west, one to the east. This process began tens of millions of years ago, not yesterday, not in 2018, not when a dramatic photograph went viral. The Earth didn't suddenly change its mind. So why does it feel sudden? Because once in a while, something visible happens. In 2018, a large fissure appeared in Kenya after heavy rains and seismic activity. Photos spread rapidly online, and within hours, the story had transformed. Africa is splitting. A new ocean is forming. Countries will fall into the sea. But the fissure wasn't a new continental rupture. It was the surface expression of long-term rifting combined with erosion and water. In other words, the Earth didn't tear open. It revealed something that was already there. This is where the myth really takes hold, because the internet doesn't reward geological timescales, it rewards urgency. And Africa is often presented not as a place with deep history and complexity, but as a stage for catastrophe. The implication is subtle but powerful. Africa is fragile, unstable, always on the verge of collapse. Even its land, apparently, can't hold itself together. But compare this to how similar processes are described elsewhere. The Atlantic Ocean exists because North America and Europe split apart. No one calls that a disaster. It's called plate tectonics. The Red Sea exists because Arabia is separating from Africa. That separation is still happening today. Ships cross it daily. Cities thrive along its coast. No countdown clock, no panic, just geology. So why does Africa splitting get framed differently? Because the myth isn't really about science, it's about spectacle. And spectacle prefers speed over scale. Let's talk scale. The African plates are separating at roughly the rate your fingernails grow, a few millimeters per year. At that pace, it would take millions of years for a new ocean basin to fully form. Did you just look at your nails? Is this a reminder for you to trim your nails? I digress. No living human will witness Africa divide into two continents. No civilization will watch cities slide into the sea. What will happen is far less cinematic. Gradual changes in elevation, volcanic activity in specific regions, earthquakes along known fault zones, all of which scientists have been studying for decades. This isn't a mystery. It's one of the best monitored rift systems on Earth. So here's the real question. If the science is clear, why does the myth persist? Because it feels like a revelation, a hidden truth finally exposed. The Great Rift Valley has shaped ecosystems, migration routes, and even human evolution. Some of the earliest hominin fossils were found along this rift system. In other words, this same process that gets framed as Africa's undoing was also part of its becoming. Rifting creates valleys. Valleys collect water. Water supports life. This isn't destruction. It's transformation. Slow, incremental, uninterested in our headlines. And that brings us to the most important myth of all, the idea that Africa is passively breaking apart, as if it's something happening to the continent. But Africa isn't a victim of geology. It's an active participant in Earth's deepest cycles. Its crust is responding exactly as physics predicts, no more, no less. The danger isn't the rift. The danger is misunderstanding it. When people believe Africa is imminently splitting, they assume instability, they assume risk, they assume decline. And those assumptions don't stay geological. They bleed into economics, into politics, into how Africa is imagined. But the truth is quieter. Africa is doing what continents do. Moving, adapting, becoming something new on a timescale that dwarfs empires. So the next time you see a video claiming Africa is breaking apart before our eyes, ask a better question. Not what's happening, but why this story is being told this way. Because the real story isn't about collapse, it's about patience. And the earth, especially beneath Africa, has always had more of it than we do.
Every episode is a new chance to test what you know and, of course, rethink what you thought you knew. Be sure to like, subscribe, and come back next time where we test your knowledge on something entirely different.